Today we're here with Nina, the owner of Hello Rent. Nina, why don't you explain to everyone who you are and what you do, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So I joined Royal LePage Sussex in the summer of 2022. I came from a brokerage that had closed, so I needed a home to first and foremost find a broker that had a property management license so I could come over and say hello. Luckily, Lawrence had that, and we sat down on a Friday morning, and by Monday I was with Royal LePage Sussex. So he was really excited to see what I could bring to the brokerage, how I could help the realtors selling rented dwellings, and just have a new face of property management at the brokerage. So
Okay, well, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad you're here with us. Now, you're a property manager. So
Yes,
can you explain what a property manager is and what they do?
yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question. So it depends on how you go into the business.
Yeah.
So when you first get your property management license, you can have an opportunity to go work for a company as an employee, or you can work for a company that offers a salary/commission program where you have an opportunity to sort of build up your own clientele, but you still have a little bit of a base to live on. Or you go with what I do at Hello Rent and have full independent contractors like realtors. So they have an opportunity to build their own businesses. And so with each one of those comes the experience. So when you're fresh out of Souter, you've got your property management license, you thought it would be fun to do, I would suggest you go to a company that is employee-based. Generally, you're just doing one task, but you're learning the business. You're learning all about how it works. Then when you have a little bit more experience, you go to a company that you have more flexibility, or not so much more flexibility, but you have more opportunity to learn the different aspects of property management. Then you come to a fully independent program like I have, where the property manager is finding the client, they're marketing the property, they're showing the property, they're vetting the tenants, they're placing the tenants, they're moving the tenants in, and then they're doing the ongoing management for the tenants as well, while maintaining the investment property for the client.
Okay, so you're not just finding a client, you're actually managing the client as well, too.
Oh, absolutely. We manage our clients as much as we manage our tenants.
Okay. So I guess my next question would be, what are the most common misconceptions that a landlord might have about a property manager?
A misconception about a property manager would be that we have a crystal ball and know exactly what their place is going to rent for, how much, what the tenants are going to be like, and if they're going to be able to get rid of them at the end when they want. But there's a lot of stigma to property managers that, all they do is collect the checks. And so again, it depends on what facet of management your client wants you to do for them. So.
Okay, well, that's totally fair enough. And that kind of leads into my next question. What would you recommend a landlord if they're considering, renting a place themselves or actually hiring a property manager?
Yeah, I have that question quite often with my clients, and because the first thing I ask them is, how much time do you have to invest in managing your tenants? What I hear all the time is, oh my God, they were the best tenants. They were there for 5 years. I never heard from them. And then they go into their unit and it's destroyed. So you know, I mean, and then they bring me in to try and get rid of the tenants. But I think what I've sort of made it something that I really am passionate about, and it's educating owners about property management and how important it is to have a property manager, because not only can we usually get more rent, we can screen the tenants much better than they can with our programs. We are the first contact for the tenants, so they're not continuously bothering the owners. And so it's important to tell an owner that, you know, that it's sort of like, you know, those commercials that they have on TV for realtors, like what happens when you don't use a realtor and all of a sudden they move into this house with like scary people next door. It's sort of the same thing. Yeah. Like if you don't use a property manager, you can really get yourself into trouble.
Yeah. Well, you know, I can attest to that. And literally a couple weeks ago, we actually had a place in Whistler, and we were not using a licensed property manager. We're using a friend who is a quote unquote property manager. My uncle decided that he wanted to sell it. So I went up there to go take a look, and the house was destroyed.
Yeah.
And his quote unquote property manager didn't know all the rental rules. Mm-hmm. So it was a bit of a nightmare to get the tenants out, and they're still dealing with that. But yeah, no, I agree. I wouldn't be renting a property out myself anymore. I kind of deflect onto you.
Well, and like I said, we can generally get more rent that would pay for our fee.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the important thing that I try to tell the owners. And it's like almost 100% of the time it's worked out that way.
Yeah. So I guess one thing that we weren't doing is these guys had been paying the same rent since 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what would you do differently in a situation like that where, you know, a tenant's been paying the same amount? Do you charge them more each year? Or how does that work?
Well, unfortunately, you can't. So that is another reason why you should hire a property manager, because I automatically do rental increases every year. And, you know, it's not retroactive. You can't go back and collect. And I can guarantee you the tenants aren't going to allow you to bring it up to the level it should be. And the thing is if these are good tenants that have been paying rent since 2008, and they're paying, you know, so let's say $1,500 for a 3-bedroom townhouse, right? And then all of a sudden, not 20, let's say 10 years later, they want to, the owners come back, they want to move back in. So these tenants are now faced with 100% increase of what they have been paying previously. And that brings me to the reason why I think that if an investment property is brought into the rental pool, it needs to stay there for the longevity of the tenant. Yeah. But there has to be some really good tax benefits and breaks for that investment, for the buyer or for the investment owner to be able to establish what sort of write-offs and stuff he can have for that loss of rent that he's not getting or that they're not getting. So it's really important, but the pendulum also has to swing to the tenant to be, if they're rogue tenants, this province has to change the legislation and get those tenants out of those rentals. Yeah. Because nobody's going to be happy until the RTB makes it easier to get out tenants that are not taking care of your property.
Got it. So I guess my next question would be, if you're a landlord and you're looking at renting your property, are you thinking about long-term or short-term? What would you recommend?
I always recommend long-term, because when it's a short-term furnished, and we don't do anything less than 3 months. So what we do is we basically it's a bunch of math, right? It's basically, okay, take a look at your rental you're getting you're getting $2,000 a month. If it's short term, you might get $3,000, but it's going to sit open for 2 months throughout the year because it's going to take, the turnover. So I always recommend it long term, unfurnished, and you get the best value for your investment. And this is what's happening with the change of legislation with no more Airbnbs unless they're in the attached. So there is going to be a surplus of furnished properties coming on the market soon, and it's going to change the dynamic about the stigma of, oh, furnished, I can get an extra, premium. Well, no, it'll be like COVID, where I will get a premium for unfurnished rentals.
Yeah.
And for longer term, because everybody's still going to try and get that short term rental rate, right? So.
Okay, well, you convinced me to use a property manager. So if I'm looking at hiring a property manager, and of course I'm going to be calling you.
Of course.
But what are the 3 best qualities I should look for in a property manager?
That they're knowledgeable of the Residential Tenancy Act. They're ethical. They're not going to do something that you tell them to do that is not allowed.
Yeah.
And they're service oriented.
Okay. Well, no, that's perfect. Yeah. Now, one thing that I struggle in my business is valuating houses. Now, I would assume that would be the same when it comes to rentals. Mm-hmm. How do you evaluate where a place should be rented at and what is fair market rent?
Well, we don't have the advantages that realtors have with the MLS and the comparisons of properties. So we have to sort of do all that legwork ourselves. Yeah. Hopefully, and I have quite a variety of properties for rent in different cities. And so the best thing is if I have currently rented something that they're interested in renting, same with buying and selling. But what we do is it's quite easy. I mean, the sites that you can look on, Craigslist, Zumper, Facebook Marketplace, and you can get a sense of, so I joined the MLS. I joined the board because I wanted access, not just to be able to show my properties for rent on the MLS, which has been a game changer for our inquiries, but also so we have the details. So Anthony, you say, oh my God, I've got an investment buyer. He's got a 2-bedroom at the bottom of Lonsdale. First thing I'll ask you to do is send me the MLS number. Yeah. So I can pull that up. I can take a look at all the details. I can say, Anthony, I just rented one in the exact same block for $39.95. That's the going rate. I'll be able to give you a fair estimate that that's what will be achieved within the next couple of months.
So you said something very interesting, because usually when I hear of people, renting their places or putting it on Craigslist and doing that, but you said that you actually put your homes on the MLS.
Yeah.
So how do you find that to be working for your business?
It was REW that started it, and it has been phenomenal. So when we get a new listing, we send it to my administrator, and she uploads it on Paragon, and we get an MLS listing. But it's fantastic because not only does it give our clients a fantastic outlook of the reach, but how many people are looking at it, the listing, just like you guys have. Yeah. It's because there's nothing like that in the rental world. So joining the board and being able to promote my properties on the MLS, they're syndicated Zillow, which is North American wide, Realtor.ca. We get fantastic media for Realtor.ca. And I'm the only one that has to be a member of the board. My property managers don't have to be. But I have to do the PDP points, which there's nothing related to property management at all. So it's quite funny.
Well, that's actually really interesting because like when it comes to me, I don't deal with anything that has to do with rentals. I literally pass them off to you. But I do find that people and other realtors that don't have licenses act like property managers.
Get a slap on the wrist if they're found out about.
So I guess what would be the liability a landlord would have using someone that was claiming to be a property manager and was not?
Well, there's no liability for the landlord, except that they could, accept that their property won't be taken care of or things like that. But the liability is with the realtor, the licensee, right? And performing duties outside of their license. So and then get disciplined and it's funny because I've had I've done some presentations on the morning, sales meetings to let realtors know that I'm there. I've had a lot of questions from realtors saying, am I allowed to do this? Yeah. And I'm like, no. Or yes, or, well, you can do it, but once it passes this point, you need to either let the owner take care of it all or pass it off to a property manager.
See, as a realtor, I have to deal with tenanted properties all the time. I do not want to deal with tenants.
No.
So I'm more than happy to use a property manager. Now, what fees would I be looking at when using a property manager? Can you explain maybe a little bit about that?
They're pretty standard. When you have, so I'll just let you know what the fees are at Hello Rent. So when we sign a client, we have a $400 administration fee, which is paid at the time of signing the contract. That takes care of all of the administration work and accounting work, setting them up in our property management portal that we have for our owners and tenants. And then it takes care of the photography, the gas to show it, little things like that. So in the event, all of a sudden they go, oh, you know what? We're not going to rent it out anymore. Then we're not at a loss. So it's a little guarantee. And it's also quite often rebated back to the owner once we place the tenant. So it's just a little guarantee. Then what we have is if it's fully managed, it's a 50% placement fee with the success of the tenant moving in, and then the ongoing monthly management. So we have a tiered system. We have 8%, which is a la carte, which they pay for everything individually, credit checks, vendor markup, all of that. And if you have a brand new place that's not going to require a lot of maintenance, it's not going to be, it's not going to be very costly for you to do the a la carte. Then we have 12%, which is all inclusive. Yeah. The 12% is mostly for our non-resident owners who we do all the tax deductions, we send all the money to the CRA, and everything's included. There's no hidden fees. So they don't pay for credit checks, they don't pay vendor markup, they don't pay for anything. It's just all in one. And for most non-resident owners, that's what they want. They just want total, they want one statement that they can get at the end of the year and send their accountant. So
perfect.
But there's one more. I've done a lot of sabbaticals in the last few years, and sabbaticals are usually for 1 year. It's when a family wants to take off and do a world trip. And so I come in, I prepare their home. Everything is pretty much as is, but I have a very detailed brochure for them to how to prepare their home for a sabbatical. And then that's a 10% flat fee, and we don't charge a placement. So there's lots of options.
So if I'm an owner, I'm thinking about renting my properties, what sites or what things can I use to help me rent to a proper tenant?
There's a really good, Landlord BC has a really good online self-paced course called I Rent It Right. And I have done it, and I have also recommended my property managers do it. I was surprised at how many I got wrong, but it's a fantastic source for owners who want to know all the legislation, but teach it themselves. And I highly recommend it. And there's another one for tenants as well, so which we can get into later.
Well, you know what? Let's get into the tenants thing now. Yeah. When we look at the needs of a property owner and the needs of tenant, how do you balance that when renting out properties?
Well, it's an understanding from the beginning. So I understand what the client needs, and through our marketing and advertising, we match it with a tenant. Yeah. So the synergies are built from the beginning. I'm obviously the middleman. Most owners prefer to be totally hands off. They don't want to have anything to do with a tenant whatsoever, except to receive that rent in the middle of the month. However, when we do placement only, which is where we do all the same services up until the tenant moves in, and then the owner takes over the management. That is really important to ensure the synergy between the client and the tenant meshes, because they're going to be dealing with each other. And so we might, I'll exercise a Zoom meeting between them. So there's no question that if those tenants turn 6 months and I have no control over it, that I have the written approval that they want me to move forward with those tenants based on their, opinion of them, and obviously all the references and background checks that we did. So it's just research. Yeah. And it's the same, we do it with the owners too. So.
Okay. So as a property manager, how do you ensure that a property doesn't get destroyed?
Well, at Hello Rent, we do periodic inspections. So it's very important, but it starts with the application. You take a look at who you're renting to, and then how they need to be managed. I will manage for students renting a condo downtown Vancouver, a little bit more hands-on than I'll be renting to a lovely professional couple in a condo in West Vancouver. Yeah. So the communication is a little bit more often with the 4 students. I've done the background, I've done the check, and 99% of the time they're perfect. There's things like how, we have a very thorough resident handbook that we give all of our tenants that specifically tells them how to take care of each property.
Yeah.
So that's what we do.
So obviously, everything can always look good on paper, and sometimes things can turn. So my question to you is, how do you deal with difficult tenants?
Well, I've been very fortunate that the only difficult tenants that I have are ones that I've inherited from a client who has lost control of their tenant. Yeah. So, but there's a process to gaining that tenant's trust when you take over, because you can't kick them out. As much as you want to, you can't. So you have 2 options. You can either be their friend or you can be their enemy. Yeah. I would much rather be their friend. So we the first thing we do is we do a meeting so they can see that I'm there to take care of them and to get their property up to a level of repair that is expected of the place that they're living. But no, you are not allowed to do that. So always, like whenever you need to go into the unit, serving official notice as per the guidelines, you need to cross your T's and dot your I's. And when the unit is, all the repairs are done and there's no more drama, life is good.
Well, that's totally fair. So I guess my next question would be, how do you maintain a good relationship with these tenants that you have in multiple places?
Well, communication. Like we're always in touch with them. So the first thing we do is when the tenant moves in, we have a lovely little welcome basket for them, which has a card that says "Welcome home." It's a small little gesture, but it sets the precedent that they are welcomed home. And so that's number one. Number two is letting them know that anything that goes on in the unit or the rental, we want to hear about. We want to hear about that small little drip that's underneath the sink that's going to turn into a massive flood if they go away for a week. We want to get that fixed, right? So we send out salutations for the holidays, like have a safe and wonderful holiday. We let them know that we send them Christmas cards. We send them birthday cards if we know their children's are having birthdays, right? We buy little toys for their pets when they move in, and just little things like that and it's like they become a part of us. And so I have great success with my tenants.
You said something interesting that you wouldn't actually invite them to let you know when things are not working.
Yeah.
Now I found out the hard way that one of our ex-tenants actually was not telling us when something would break down.
Right.
Because he was so happy with the rent and he didn't want to cause an issue. So I guess when you have a property that has, let's say, a little faucet issue, how do you manage that and how do you take care of that?
Yeah, well, I have a fantastic pool of vendors that I worked for many, many years. So the first thing, like when they move in, we give them instruction on how to submit an issue or a appliance repair or something that's not working. So they send that to me. I call out, let's say their dishwasher is leaking or something. So they'll let me know. They'll send me the make, model, and serial number. I'll call Combined Appliance. Combined Appliance will call them, and they'll get it fixed. When that's happening, I reach out to the owner, just saying we have a limit of $500 on our contracts with the owners that we don't have to reach out to get approval if anything is under $500. We let them know everything. So when there's a deduction in their rental income on the 15th, they know why. Yeah. But then there's also, I grew up on a farm. I grew up with a dad that said, figure it out, right? So honestly, when a tenant calls me and says, oh my God, I've got a load of laundry in and there's an error code and I can't open it up, I walk them over to the fuse box that I showed them when they moved in, tell them to flip the switch of the washing machine, wait 30 seconds, turn it back on, voila, they have a working washing machine. Save the owner $200, tenants think I'm fabulous, life is good.
You're not talking about millennials, are you? No. We're not going there, are we? So at Hello Rent, how do you manage multiple properties without sacrificing quality?
Well, there's limits, and I know my limit, and I'm about quality service, not quantity, and that's how I have been able to build 100% referral-based successful business for myself. And because when I started the Hello Rent team with Royal LePage, I brought on team members that could do certain parts of what is required, like the marketing and the showings and things that are you need the boots on the ground to do that. So I've teamed up with other members to be able to continue to grow my book.
Yeah.
The sweet spot for an independent contractor is 50 properties to be able to do it solely on their own. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you see it with any company that grows too big and the service and the values get lost.
Yeah.
It's the same with property management. You can only do so much.
So there's a lot of Airbnbs that are going to come to the end of its lifespan in a few weeks here. What is one thing you want to tell those owners right now that are thinking about selling their property or maybe switching to a long-term rental?
Well, that's hard to say because I don't know financially how they're invested in that property. So I would say unfurnish it, rent it long term. But that could be a quarter of the rent that they were getting as an Airbnb. So if that wasn't on the table as an issue, I would just, let's turn it into a long-term rental, have longevity, continuous income. That would be my advice. It's sad to see what's going on out there with a lot of people who have recently invested in Airbnbs, especially with the World Cup coming, things like that. It was a little bit like the Olympics. Everybody thought that they'd be able to buy these, especially in Squamish. Squamish was, because I started property management in 2010. So I saw the fallout up there of pre-Olympic to post-Olympic. And it was really sad, actually.
Well, you know what? It's one of those things that, obviously you can actually help them and hopefully place people that are looking for tenants and help them out that way. I guess one question leading into my next question, what is the situation where it was actually problematic, but you turned it into something that was quite successful?
Well, problematic is subjective.
Yes.
What I look at is when I see, like, for instance, some clients will call me, they'll bring me to, and I'll do an exact example. So they inherited their home from their parents. It had been basically rented here and there with families and friends, but they were being faced with the vacancy tax and needed to get a long-term tenant in there. They were renting a lovely 3-bedroom plus den detached house on East 17th. Lovely, good bones. And they were charging about $3,000 a month. There was a lot of work that needed to be done to it, but it had super good bones. It also had that 1960s pristine wood floor underneath that white carpet that had been walked on for 40 years. So I came in and I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to pull out this carpet. We're going to give it a paint job. All the appliances were pretty new. We're going to do these. We're going to do that. We're going to get it professionally cleaned. And we're going to unfurnish it. We're going to get the 1960s furniture out of here because they wanted that. What are we going to do with it? That's always the biggest question. And they don't realize how much it's going to cost them to keep that old couch in the living room. So it cost about $7,500 to complete all the aesthetic things in that home to make it rent ready. And I changed that rent from $3,000 to $5,000, rented it immediately. They made their money back for 4 months, and it's rented now with one single gentleman for 5 years for $5,000. So they're going to get rent increases for the next 5 years as well.
Wow.
So those I love. I love those projects.
Well, no, that's great to hear. So I guess, how do you market a property so it appeals to high quality tenants?
Well, all of my tenants are quality tenants.
Yes.
So it's important that the property that I'm marketing is clean, in good repair, and it doesn't matter if it's a studio, it doesn't matter if it's a 10,000 square foot house in the properties. They're all screened exactly the same way. They're given the same respect and the same dignity. And so that's where the tenant becomes quality, because their expectation of coming into the home, of a quality home, is there.
Got it. Now, my mom, she used to rent houses out, and she would do it herself. She would actually go through back then the North Shore News and look at all the properties, and she would figure out what she thought her property was worth, and then usually rent her property out for $50 at the time, which was quite a bit, but $50 less than where she thought would be fair. So she would get more inquiries, and then she would vet.
Yeah. And the same system works today. Yeah. So I tell when an owner says that they want, so I have a beautiful brand new 3-bedroom in the new 1335 Howe, gorgeous. It was just built in 2022. And when I did a market evaluation, there are so many 3-bedroom units for rent in the downtown Vancouver core. Some are furnished, some are not. I told them, like, you need the step up here. I said, so they're all on average between $700 and $8,500 a month, if you can swallow that. So I said, let's rent it at $69.50. Let's just take, it's $50 difference.
Yeah.
Rented. Just that tiny little strategic marketing, like you do with everything else.
Yeah.
Just take it below that threshold where everybody else is, because everybody's going to put in between $6,500 and $69.99. So if you're at 70, if you're at 7 and your competitors at $69.50, guess what? But we also pick up the phone.
Yes.
And we answer every single inquiry that comes in, and that's been our ticket to success.
So a lot has changed since my mom in the North Shore News, but how has technology actually helped you in your business?
Oh, it's been amazing. So everything to our application platform, we can do not just credit checks, we do soft checks, we do criminal checks, and we do social media checks now, which is a one-stop shop. So cost you $100, but we can find out what brand of toilet paper you're using.
Okay, interesting.
And then we also use a photo move-in inspection platform. So it's in pictures the condition of your home when the tenants moved in. And so there's no question when they move out whether the damage was there or not. And then we also, of course, we have Buildium, which is our platform for our owners and our tenants. And we collect rent by electronic transfers. We deposit. So technology has simplified the process and made it more efficient, for sure.
Okay, that's fair. So when I was a tenant looking to rent a place, my social media was open. I was at a nice Speedo, and I wasn't getting too many inquiries. No? What would you recommend a tenant do when looking for properties, and how to maybe help their chances of getting that property?
Yeah, so being proactive, like if coming to the viewing with your reference letters, your credit checks, you can, almost everybody has access to their credit now. So just make sure that your name and the date that you printed the credit, are there. Ensuring that you answer inquiries professionally. Yeah. I mean, how many times I'll get a text message, is this available? And I'm like, all right, please let me know which property you're interested in and your name. And then I send them my website. And 9 times out of 10, they respond and go, oh, hey, what's this property? What's this property? Because I get a pause on the phone when I answer it, because they never get a human being when they're inquiring for property, like on listings.
That's fair. That's fair. Now, if you're a younger person and you're looking to rent, what is one way maybe to help elevate you to get that property? Is a co-signer a way of doing that, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have a co-signing line on my tenancy agreements. I'm the first one to advocate for how hard it is for students and young adults to rent in this city. So if they're not coming to me with 5 years of credit and a hefty bank account, I'll get a co-signer. But if they've just arrived to the city and they've got 2 really good jobs, I've placed 5 Ukrainian families in the last 2 months. They're not coming with credit. They're not coming with a flush bank account, but they're coming with integrity. And that's who I want as my tenants.
What if you're about to rent a home and the house needs maintenance, but the landlord isn't willing to maintain the property? What do you do in that situation?
Well, I don't work with those clients, period. And so that's something that is established and is very clear in my contracts, that if you don't allow me to maintain your property for the sake of those tenants, and trust that I'm going to do it efficiently and effectively, I won't take you as my client.
Now, when you are signing up these clients or these tenants, do you have your own tenancy agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
I've actually rewritten the management contracts, the tenancy agreements, the pet agreements, liability, everything, to ensure the most protection for my clients.
Okay. What are some loopholes in that residential tenancy standard contract? I don't want you to give me all the secrets, but
no. Well, one of the it's the liability, the liquidated damages for a tenant when they breach their contract. That's not protected enough in the online RTB form that you get. There's nothing about tenant insurance. Now, tenant insurance is not mandatory in this province, but we say it is, and we say it in our ads that it's mandatory. So there's no question when all of a sudden when we reach out and say, okay, we say we need that tenant insurance before you move into the property. Sometimes that's not possible if it's a last minute, but there's no question. It's $50 a month. It protects them. It protects their belongings if there's a flood or fire. It protects them in rent if they get displaced if there's a flood or fire. I think the basic is 3 months of your rent gets covered if you need to be displaced. But the most important thing is the third party liability for the owners. So if your tenants or their guests break their leg or whatever, it's, they can't sue you. So that to me is pretty important. And it should be mandatory that tenants have insurance in this province.
If I'm a tenant or a landlord, how can I stay informed with all this new legislation that's always popping up?
Take the course. I Rent It Right.
And where can I find that?
Online, and it's a self-paced online course.
Okay. If I'm a renter, how can I distinguish whether a listing is real or fake?
Well, it's like the old saying, if it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. So, I actually had an experience I can tell you about. It was the fraudsters had taken my photos off of Craigslist, and my house was being rented Upper Lonsdale for $4,500 a month. They took all my photos. They created an ad for $2,500 a month. Well, you can imagine how many people responded to that. But the funny thing is they would call and they would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't be there, but you're welcome to walk around the property." Well, sometimes when that property is vacant, that's okay. but the owners hadn't left yet. So these tenants are showing up, and so the owner's looking at this ad going, oh my goodness. Well, luckily Craigslist does have a good fraud team now that can monitor that. But what I do now is I watermark my photos with the Hello Rent stamp, so they can't be counterfeited, if that's the right word. So yeah, and again, never give money before you have a signed agreement, and always ask for a virtual tour.
Fair. A lot has been made about subleases. Nina, can you explain what a sublease is?
A sublet tenant is really important in this province to be able to sustain the affordability of the exorbitant rents that they have in this province. So it is not against the residential tenants. It's allowed. You are allowed to sublet. It's in the lease, and it's usually a sublet tenant is usually for a maximum of 6 months. It's if a tenant is paying a good rent, they're heading off to work for 6 months somewhere or a vacation, and they don't want to lose their rental. They need the rental income, so they bring in a sublet tenant. They have to get the approval of the landlord. The landlord cannot reasonably say no at all. Tenant can charge whatever they want. Some landlords say, "Oh, if I want a little piece of that pie," right? It's like, no, not going to happen. But it's important that I've had owners actually tell me to put a clause in my contracts that say no sublets allowed, and I refused. In fact, I lost a client because of that. Because that's where ethics is my number one, and integrity, and so, but sublets are, it's how people can afford to live in the city, and it's different. A lot of people put sublets and Airbnb in the same category. They're not. They're totally different things. Sublets are like, if you're a tenant and you want to sublet your second bedroom, there is nothing the landlord can say. However, you should have your tenant insurance changed, so in the event that sublet tenant something happens, it's on the insurance, right? So, but I think I love sublets, and when tenants reach out and ask if they can sublet this room, I'm like, absolutely, you can. Just let me know. Give me their name, their contact information, so I have it for emergencies. And
so, where do you see the rental market going in the next 3 years? And I know that's a loaded question.
I don't think they're going to go much higher, but it's all supply and demand. I was actually not expecting them to maintain their sort of 2023 summer prices, which I'm still getting. But that's also because the market didn't keep going down. It turned. So when the real estate market turns, that affects the prices of rentals as well, supply and demand. So but in December there was a lull, and where I could have got today $3,700 for a 2-bedroom, I was getting $31,000. Some were quite highly, like there was like a 30% drop in some of them in November and December. But they all stayed relative, right? It's kind of that ziggy scale going up. I honestly don't think that there's going to be too much increase in 3 years. I think they're capped, if you ask me.
What advice would you give a new landlord looking to rent their house?
Preparation, So the first thing I do when I come and meet a new client who wants to rent their property, I come and I do a visual assessment of what they can approximately get, the work that's required to get it prepared for rental. And that's when an evaluation is done as well. And yeah.
If you were given the option to change anything about the rental market in Vancouver, other than price, what's something that you would do to, one, help a landlord, and then the same question, but to help a tenant?
Well, it goes back to what I was talking about before, how I believe that the legislation has to change in BC, where if there, and it's very similar in Sweden, this is how they operate. And when you have an investment property, it remains as a rental for the longevity of the tenants that are in that rental. So, and you can still sell it and buy it, but the tenant's home is secure for as long as they need it for.
With the new legislation that now all properties in Vancouver are going to be allowed at least 3 to 4 and even up to 6 units on a single family dwelling, how do you see the rental market being affected by that, say long term in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, those are actually good family homes, generally speaking. I think, it gives them a little bit more maybe space and good location. And so I think it's great. I see a lot of those coming up along, the sort of East Hastings corridor, or is that where they mostly are? But there's sort of, I think it's great. I mean, taking that one older rundown house and creating wonderful homes for families. I think it's wonderful.
That's fair. Yeah. If you were renting a home right now, would you furnish it or rent it unfurnished?
Unfurnished, long term.
And that's going to yield you more money?
Yes.
All right, there you go. So if you're looking to get a hold of Nina or want to learn a little bit more, Nina, how do they get a hold of you?
They can go through my website, Hello Rent BC, and just give me a call.
Okay. Now, you're telling me you have a brochure that you are going to send me a link for. I'm going to put in the description, but can you tell me about that?
Yes, it's a really comprehensive services brochure of everything that we do at Hello Rent, but it's also what the property managers do at Royal LePage. And it has everything from like how we vet the tenants, the marketing that we use. And we also have another service fee brochure, which details exactly what you're getting for our fees. And I'm happy to give you those links as well.
Yeah, so perfect. Well, thank you, Nina, for joining us.
Well, thank you. It was so much fun.
Yeah, and Matt, thank you for everything. And we're done for today. So, guys, thank you and have a great day. Thanks, Nina.